The topic is Role of Women in STEM Addressing Climate Change. The world needs science. Science needs women. This is the logo of our UNESCO L'Oréal for Women in Science program, which encapsulates the need for bright, young scientists and engineers around the world. The reason we emphasize young women is due to this being a relatively untapped resource with half the world's population who could definitely excel in a male-dominated field. There is a great potential in terms of brilliant, enthusiastic young women who would make excellent future role models and leaders in science, engineering, and technology. And this is why women in both science and engineering are extremely important for UNESCO. In order for us to secure a sustainable future, addressing sustainable development within the current climate change challenges will require innovative engineering and technology-based solutions. Engineering and technology capacity and competence building activities are critical to ensure an adequate supply of engineers and scientists to work on these global challenges. Such activities are particularly important in Africa, where the per capita number of engineering professionals is lower than in other regions. Given this engineering deficit, activities that promote awareness of engineering as a career, as well as show how youth studying science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, known as STEM, can become part of the solution, have high priority. STEM offers answers to key questions we must address over the next century. Questions about equitable and inclusive growth, about sustainable development, about the resilience of our societies. Science, technology, and innovation can contribute to reaching all of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and young women will be part of the solution for global solutions for the future. Science and engineering are at the heart of our pursuit of a more equitable, more prosperous, and more sustainable 21st century, and women must play a leading role as researchers, innovators, and pioneers in this great future. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish you a successful event with some of the most brilliant women engineers. Thank you. Again, on behalf of the OIC Director of the Division Science Policy and Basic Science, thank you to all of you. I would now like to hand over the floor to our moderator, Ms. Peggy Ottiboti, Senior Science Advisor in the Natural Sciences sector at UNESCO, who will introduce the topic and the speakers. Over to you, Peggy.
Thank you very much, Amal, and thank you for those kind words on behalf of the Acting Director of the Division. Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, colleagues, and dear friends, it's my pleasure, to moderate this session, this topical session on the role of women in STEM in addressing climate change. This topic is more urgent now than ever before, and I'd like to just share with you some basic statistics from the UNESCO Science Report 2021, in that women, at bachelor level, are gaining parity in science, technology, and mathematics. But when it comes to science, there's still a minority in science, with only 33% of women in research in science. The data is even not very good when it comes to engineering. Globally, we only have 28% of women in engineering. And then when it comes to AI, which is the future, jobs, we only have 22%. So there's really a long way for women in breaking this gap. In particular, the COVID-19 has indicated the imperative for women to be involved in STEM, but especially in climate change. where we're looking at addressing biodiversity loss, resilience building to climate change, and most importantly, issues of water or health. We really need women in that. So today we have internationally well-known women in their own individual capacities to share with us their perspectives on women in climate change and what they, have been doing, but especially some of the good practices that they would like to share with us. Without much ado, I would like to introduce the first speaker, but I also encourage you, online participants, please, we have a chat, put in your comments and also your suggestions, because they are, very welcome. But before, I give the floor to the first speaker, I would like to thank, the team for putting this together, but in particular, our colleagues from the World Federation of Engineering Organization, and particularly Marlene, for, partnering with UNESCO to do this. And that leads me to introducing you. And Marlene is one of the first authors of the UNESCO 2021, Engineering for the Sustainable Development Goals. She gave a perspective of all the 17 goals. So we have here Marlene, Dr. Marlene Kanga from Australia. She's the past president of the World Federation of Engineering Organization, which is the apex of over 100 engineering institutions. She's a chemical engineer by profession herself. She's also a board member of many international organizations, including big organizations, not only in Australia, but also globally. She has led many initiatives to improve diversity in organization in Australia and internationally. Dr. Kanga has been among the 100 engineers making a contribution in Australia in the past 100 years as part of the Engineers Australia Centenary Celebration in 2019. She's also, been identified as the top 100 women of influence and one of the top 10 women in engineering in Australia. So without much ado, Dr. Kanga, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Peggy, for that kind introduction. And my thanks to Dr. Amal Kazri, Chief of Section, for hosting this event, and to the UNESCO team. I want to also acknowledge Ms. Rovani Sigamoni and the team at UNESCO for collaborating with WFEO to bring you this very important and exciting event. I'm so pleased to see leading women engineers from every region of the world speaking here today, and the diversity that we represent, not just geographically, but also ethnically and in age and so on. And it just shows that we women can really do it. So without further ado, I shall share my screen. So let's see if I can do that, and I hope that you can see my screen. So I'm going to talk about the role of women addressing climate change, especially the role of women leaders in science and engineering. And Dr. Peggy Oti-Boateng has talked about the fact that only 20% of engineers in the world are women, but in fact, in leadership roles, there are even fewer. So we really need that voice. First, a little bit about the World Federation of Engineering Organizations. We're the peak body for professional engineering institutions with members from some 100 nations, as well as 12 regional and continental members, together representing some 30 million engineers. And we are an associate of UNESCO and also the co-chair of the Major Science and Technology Group at the United Nations. And we represent engineering at the major UN organizations. So it's really fitting that we are speaking here tonight at this very important United Nations side event at the Commission on the Status of Women. Here you see our member map from around the world. And I'm so pleased that tonight we have two of our national members from the Philippines and from Cameroon also represented as speakers. I'm very proud about that too. A key objective of the World Federation of Engineering Organizations since 2018, when I took up my presidency of the Federation, is to advance the UN Sustainable Development Goals through engineering. The World Federation collaborated with UNESCO to advance this objective, including the declaration of World Engineering Day for Sustainable Development in November 2019. The second UNESCO engineering report, Engineering for the Sustainable Development Goals, also aligned with this vision and shows the important work that needs to be done by engineers, including women engineers, and how engineering can make it happen. And we are working with UNESCO to build capacity for more engineers with the right skills to advance the goal of sustainable development, because the world needs more engineers to address, especially to address climate change. I'm going to go back in history to 1856 and the female scientist Eunice Foote. Most of you would not have heard of her, but she in fact discovered and was the first one to discover the warming effect of the sun's rays on carbon dioxide. In fact, that's the climate change effect of global warming. But at the time, she could not even present her paper at the American Academy of Science. This was presented by a man on her behalf. And the credit for discovery of global warming was claimed by another man, John Tyndall, who discovered it 3 years later. How often have we heard this story of women being usurped by men in their early discoveries? But climate change is also affecting women greatly around the world. Research has shown that vulnerability to climate change increases with gender equality, as you can see in this graph, and climate action decreases in nations as gender inequality increases. So there is a great need to address gender equality, because then women have the voice to address climate change. The UNDP did a very interesting report in 2020 and said that the planetary imbalances cannot be addressed until we address social imbalances. And they measured that in terms of a gender inequality index, which was composed of health factors like maternal mortality ratio, education and political empowerment, and levels of female employment. And their graph showed that increasing social inequality, as measured in terms of inequality in human development, the gender inequality index, and the share of children, that is increasing numbers of children, also correlated highly with ecological threat levels and with vulnerability to climate change. So clearly we need to address gender equality if we're going to address climate change. But there's also the impact and need for women's leadership in science and engineering on climate change action. For example, data from large samples of countries shows that female representation in politics leads countries to adopt more stringent climate change policies. The representations of females in parliament results in lower carbon dioxide emissions. So female political representation may be an underutilized tool for addressing climate change. In terms of leadership on boards, for example, research shows that there's a significantly negative relationship between board gender diversity and carbon emissions. That is, more diverse boards with higher percentages of women tend to take action to reduce their organization's carbon footprint. The moderation effect of environmental innovation is also more pronounced in carbon-intensive firms than non-carbon intensive firms. So there's a multiplier effect if you have more women on boards in addressing climate change. Greater female board representation and female chief executive officers often reduce the frequency of corporate environmental violations and often and these companies are sued less often for environmental infringements. These findings are very consistent with other studies that show that corporate governance and policies for gender diversity on boards of organizations enhance board effectiveness in satisfying the needs of broader groups of stakeholder interests. So now to leadership at the IPCC. Since the IPCC, or the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, came together in the late 1980s, the ratio of female authors has increased from just 3% to over 30%, so still very low. They adopted a gender policy in 2020, and in 2015, you see Kate Barrett pictured here, was one of the first women to be elected vice chair of the IPCC, along with Thelma Krug from Brazil. And they then proceeded to bring in the gender policies and create higher awareness of the low percentage of women at the IPCC, mainly because globally women are underrepresented in science, technology, and engineering and mathematics, which limits the pool for authors to contribute. And also IPCC depends on member countries to nominate authors, and women have lower likelihoods of being nominated. We also need more representatives from developing countries, which tend to have lower proportions in the pool. And you can see here the participation of women in 2014 in finance mechanism boards was well below 50. And in terms of attendance at the Rio conventions, the NGOs approached 50%, but government and bureau members were well below. This, however, has been improving. And you can see that increasing proportions of women and heads of delegation at the various COP meetings increased from 10% in 2009 to 21% in 2019. And you can see here also the range of percentages of women in various committees involved in discussing climate change in terms of the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Agreement. So this looks not too bad, some numbers approaching 46%. But if you look at the contribution of women at these meetings, it's very low, because it's men who lead the delegations, men who are the speakers, men who take up the bulk of the plenary session times, as you can see here. So women still have a very long way to go. And you can see here the global participation of women in science is very low. And you can see the dark purple is 70% and the very light purple is 30% or less. So again, we have a low, very small pool of women that can contribute. A recent study of academies of science by the International Science Council also showed that there were low proportions of women. And in engineering in particular, it was only 10%. I'm a member of the Australian Academy, and so you can see a minority of women make it to these leadership positions. The UNESCO engineering report had a hero message on the need for more girls to consider engineering as a career. And we've been pushing the message, including, for example, in the executive summary and chapter 1 that I authored on the role of engineering and sustainable development. I featured all 17 of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And I'm proud to say that 8 of the 17 featured women engineers at work, showing that women can and do make a great contribution. And we just need to be recognized for the voice that we need to have for climate change. And of course, the UN Secretary General agrees in terms of his Twitter feed at World Engineering Day 2021 on the need for more women engineers, because engineering needs more brain power, not muscle power. We need more engineers, especially women engineers, to develop the transformative technology, especially in the digitally connected workforce, especially in the post-COVID world, and to contribute to diversity of thought that is vital for innovation. And new technologies are also empowering women, mobile communications and the internet, and access to banking, entrepreneurship, improved outcomes for health, education, and childcare. And women leaders are making a difference at the grassroots level on climate change. And I've shown here 3 leaders from Liberia, Malawi, and from West Bengal in India, where women are leading discussions on managing land, on community and land development that also addresses climate change. So women and men are experiencing climate change differently, but as gender inequalities persist, we need to ensure that women have a voice so that individuals and communities can adapt, and that women are recognized in terms of their contribution, not just as carers, but as experts that can lead to successful long-term solutions to climate change. We have proven the ability to lead the way to more equitable and sustainable solutions. And across sectors, we just need the voice, because women engineers can create the world we want. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kanga, for that insight and for that data. And just, very interesting listening to you, and the data you presented really corroborates with UNESCO Science Report 2021, where we still have very, very few women in decision making. But I have three key messages that I'd like to share with everybody, is that we need more women with the right skill to address climate change. But more importantly, we also need to strengthen, climate action by promoting gender equality. So thank you very much, Dr. Kanga. Our second speaker and panelist is Dr. Renetta Garrison-Toole from US. Dr. Toole is the Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the University of California, Davis. She previously served as Associate Vice Provost for Strategic Initiatives at the University of Maryland, Baltimore. She was the founding director and co-PI for 12 Institution National Science Foundation University System of Maryland, dubbed Promise EGAB. Dr. Toole also earned engineering and science degrees from Howard University, and also served as a postdoctoral fellow under, Anna Julia Cooper at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And she has held faculty positions at University of Wisconsin-Madison and University of Maryland, College Park. She is an international speaker, and I've heard her myself speak on STEM and the need for diversity. She's passionate, and she's an advocate and a mentor, especially for championing equity. So ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Dr. Toole to make her presentation. So thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Odi Boateng. It's so good to be here with all of you today. I'm not going to have slides this morning. I have some prepared remarks. And I say to all, good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are in the world. I saw all kinds of places in the chat, and I know that people are joining us from around the globe. So I come to you from California, on the West Coast of the United States, where it's a little after 5 o'clock in the morning. And I'm excited to share on this topic, the role of women in STEM addressing climate change. I thank Ravani Sigamoni from UNESCO for the invitation. And I do acknowledge the WFEO past president, Dr. Marlena Kanga, who just spoke a few minutes ago, along with all of the esteemed panelists who are here today. I also amplify a key statement made by UN Women's Executive Director, Seema Sami Bahus, on International Women's Day of 2022, where a few weeks ago, she said that women, especially young women, are solution multipliers. My position as Vice Chancellor for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the University of California, Davis, which is in the northern region of California, provides opportunities to push for gender equity SDG 5. And my faculty position as an adjunct professor in electrical and computer engineering allows for work in humanitarian engineering. While climate change may not be my specific field, it is at this intersection of working for gender equality and humanitarian engineering that I'm pleased to cultivate and recognize women's contributions in climate change advocacy and research. A few years ago, my work and the work of other engineers was featured in volume 1 of the Rising to the Top book series on women in engineering. And this was published by the International Federation of Engineering Education Societies, or IFES, and the Global Engineering Deans Council, GEDC. With more women than ever pursuing engineering careers, it's important to ensure that women are supported and empowered to reach their full potential as leaders. And so by telling our personal stories, Rising to the Top seeks to inspire the next generation to overcome whatever challenges face them in order to seek their goals. One example from the book is Professor Christina Troice from Italy. Christina is a full professor in environmental engineering and the South African Research Chair in Waste and Climate Change. She's worked on multi-million-dollar projects in South Africa, bringing expertise in waste and climate change for sustainable cities, as well as alternative building materials. And she developed and coordinates the first master's program in waste and resources in South Africa, and has initiated international programs such as Engineering is a Girl Thing. And I would be remiss if I didn't recognize the WIM-ENG, or Women in Engineering program in South Africa, which is also deeply steeped in the work of building resilient women in engineering bodies, and it's critical to amplify advocacy and action across the continent. I'm also looking forward to being with colleagues in Cape Town, South Africa later this year in the 2022 conference of the World Engineering Education Forum, partnering with the African Engineering Education Association Conference under the topic, Adapting to Global Disruption, where we're asked to think about how we can develop and design stable environments that are less vulnerable and more resilient to climate and global disruption. How do we develop and design sustainable and cohesive planet solutions for our future? As many of you know, the UN Sustainable Development Goals are some of the key levers that we can use to anchor climate change efforts and to make real impact. These goals are embedded in the tenets of justice, stewardship, and equity. In recent years, leaders have identified important intersections between Goal 13, climate action, and SDG Goal 5, gender equality. According to an analysis of 130 peer-reviewed studies by the Global Gender and Climate Alliance, women and girls are disproportionately affected by climate change. They're more likely to die, experience food insecurity, suffer from mental illness, and experience domestic violence. These differences are largely attributed to their societal role, the work they do, and their access to healthcare and other services. In the words of Vanessa Nakate, Ugandan climate activist, you can't have climate justice without gender equality. Like her fellow activists, young women from around the world are taking up this cause and making a difference. Artemisa Chacriaba is a 19-year-old indigenous climate activist of the Chacriaba people of Brazil. Rahima Pandey in India is advocating for climate action in India. And of course, Greta Thunberg of Sweden, a student activist who's inspired young people around the world, holds leaders accountable for making actual, real, and tangible progress to heal our climate. In our institutions of higher education, women scholars are doing this work to turn everything around. And one of my fellow engineers is Carolina Senes Guerrero, a full-time professor and researcher at Tecnológico de Monterrey, a campus in Guadalajara, Mexico. As you know, an increasing human population means sustainable food production without negative impacts on valuable natural resources is one of our natural and our global challenges. And Dr. Guerrero researches the molecular characterization of plant-associated microbial communities and their behavior, and how to use microorganisms for human benefit to create environmentally friendly solutions. And there's several women from that university who are also involved in climate change work, including Alma Cuellar Sanchez, Maria Gabriela Ortiz Martinez, Aura Elena Moreno Guzman, Ana Yael Vanoye Garcia, Lucy Teresa Gonzalez Hernandez, Mariana Franco Morgado, and Carolina Janani de Legros Godinez. There's a saying that everything that is local is global, and everything that is global is local. And that's true even of the work that we do in California at UC Davis. And I work with the UC Davis Vice Provost for Global Affairs and the Director for the Office of Sustainability. And it gives me great pleasure to highlight some of the women engineers at Davis who are doing the work of climate sustainability, including SDGs 9 and 13. Dr. Sabi Miller, an assistant professor of civil engineering and environmental engineering, focuses on reducing the environmental impacts of the built environment. Dr. Gail Taylor, a professor of plant sciences, develops sustainable solutions for larger harvests in small spaces using efficient harvesting techniques. Dr. Diane Beckles of the College of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences is looking at sustainable foods in the midst of climate change with projects such as sustaining wheat grain protein content under environmental stress. And Dr. Dawn Sumner is a UC Davis professor of Earth and Planetary Sciences and a member of NASA's Mars Science Laboratory. She studies polar jet stream, Arctic lakes, and astrobiology in Greenland. She also writes about climate change denial. In her paper, Earth is Warming, Even Though Winter is Cold, she writes, during conversations regarding climate change, there is a common myth that climate denialists bring up to try to debunk human-caused climate change. The myth is that winters are getting colder, therefore Earth is not warming and climate change is not occurring. When applying the FLICC, which is fake experts or logical fallacies, impossible expectations, cherry picking, and conspiracy theories, this myth falls under the category of cherry picking and misrepresentation. Although one winter in one area, such as the East Coast of the United States or parts of Europe, may be colder than the previous year, it does not detract from the fact that the global temperatures are steadily increasing. Now, National Science Foundation has a program called Advance for organizational change and gender equity in STEM academic professions. And in that work, we also have a center called the Center for Advancement of Multicultural Perspectives on Science. And one of those scientists is Jackie Pena, a professor of civil and environmental engineering. And her work lies at the intersection of natural, managed, and engineered ecosystems aimed to advance sustainable solutions to the environmental quality problems. Rebecca Hernandez is yet another one of these great women doing work on the human-created problems in the biosphere. And our new dean, Dr. Estela Ataquana, is the dean of the largest college, Letters and Science. She's pioneered biogeophysics in the subdiscipline of geophysics. And her work, most recently in Uganda, studies nascent continental rift basins that have applications for the search for life in extreme environments. We're concerned about these issues, and the effects of climate change must continue to be studied. But more importantly, we have to mitigate its risks. In an article sharing that Dr. Jana Mazet was going to be UC Davis's vice provost for Grand Challenges, it said the tragic and personal and social costs of the COVID-19 pandemic, the devastating effects of climate change on the earth and its living things have powerfully driven home a critical lesson. If we want to protect ourselves and our world, we must, without further delay, make unprecedented efforts to address the global challenges that most threaten them. Dr. Mazet, also a professor of epidemiology and disease ecology, talks about the world's wicked problems, And she's among several researchers thinking about contingency plans for being able to live on other planets. However, preservation of planet Earth is still the goal. Last year, both Dr. Mazet and Vanessa Nakate were in the 2021 class of 16 women restoring the Earth, and the Global Landscapes Forum said that they were among the 16 women leading Earth's restoration as the world enters the last decade for climate action. In conclusion, what can we do to support women's research and climate activism? UNESCO's Engineering Report 2 shares that we need to expose women to the SDGs, such as SDG 13 on climate action, and invite them to be change agents through orientations and introductory courses. We need to mentor women for leadership roles and group projects for these goals. We need to include them in our presentations, as Dr. Kanga mentioned. And we also need to make sure that we're highlighting women as solution multipliers. And I thank you for this opportunity to share more about some of the women who are doing this work. I implore you that as we think about this difficult work, to also work to think about yourselves as activists, as advocates, and to continue this work. We salute you and we support you. Thank you very much for this time this morning.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Tu, and especially for reminding us that we should highlight women as solution multipliers, particularly in the areas of, climate change. And also thank you very much for sharing the work of distinguished women and engineers who are the forefront of climate change. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is from Philippines, and we have Dr. Julian Tapel. Dr. Tapel is a chartered professional engineer, and she's the director of Bureau of Agriculture and Fisheries in the Ministry of Agriculture. She was likewise a member of the professional regulatory body for agriculture and biosystems engineering in professional regulation commissions on current capacity until March 3rd, 2022. She was the national president and chair of the Women's Engineer of Asian Federation of Engineering Organization and chair of Women Engineers Network. She's also one of the outstanding agricultural women engineers identified by her organization. Dr. Tapel is also an engineer and scientist with the 95 inspiring engineers and technologists in the past, present, and future from all over the world. We present to you, Dr. Tapel, to share your experiences from the Asia region. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Peggy. So good evening from the Philippines and also from Australia. And good afternoon to all our colleagues at Paris, France, and maybe good morning in the US and other parts of the world. So allow me to share my presentation on the role of women in STEM in addressing climate change. Okay, can you see my presentation? First of all, I wish to thank UNESCO for this opportunity to be one of the finalists of this side event of the 66th session of the Commission on the Status of Women. So may I present to you my outline? First of all, may I share with you our advocacy and initiatives, the climate of climate change, particularly in our country, then the roles of women in the STEM addressing climate change, my professional contribution as an agricultural and biosystem engineer, our contribution to climate change in our professional practice, specifically in my office, the Bureau of Agriculture and Fisheries Engineering, of the Philippine Department of Agriculture. For the sake of time, I will just share to you our top 5 initiatives, which is the REPAPs, or the Renewable Energy Program for the Agri-Fishery Sector. Then the NOAP, or the National Organic Agriculture Program, which is an application of precision agriculture. Then we have the FMR, or the Farm to Market Roads. Then also the ABIMIS, or the Agricultural and Biosystems Engineering Management Information System, and the GIP, or the Government Internship Program for Agricultural and Biosystems Engineering, and a very short conclusion. Now let's go to the advocacy and initiative. So my advocacy, allow me to share with you my personal stories and initiatives that also encompass my organization and my office. First of all, my advocacies and initiatives are rooted in my profession, which is agricultural and biosystems engineering. From agricultural, it rise one of our initiative or advocacies, which is food security, that is providing nutritious and safe food for our people. And from biosystems emanates the climate change initiative. So we have to align this with our situation in the Philippines, which is very vulnerable to the impact of climate change. So next is, may I share with you some of these impacts of climate change in the Philippines? You know, we are visited by strong typhoons. It's 25 typhoons in a year, sometimes a very strong one. And then we have also drought or El Nino phenomenon. And this resulted to damage to our crops and desertification. And sometimes there is also flooding or the La Nina phenomenon. And our fishing grounds has already rise, so there are coral loss, and the rising sea level has also devastated our agricultural lands, including our residential or residences. So may I now share with you my contribution and my role as a women engineer to the climate change. I wish to examine my participation or contribution in the 3 paradigm or perspective. First, being a wife and a mother. Second, being a friend and a sister. And of course, I will focus more on the professional practice of agricultural and biosystems engineer. So this is only very simple for wife and a mother. Of course, being a mother, we should be a role model to our family, especially to our husband and also to our children. I have 3 children. We have to inculcate in their minds and also with their values the protection for our environment, that they should not be littering something. They should know at their very early age the essence of segregation, composting, because I have a small garden in our house. So all our refuse from vegetables, from fruits, so we just put it in a composting pit so we can utilize it for our fertilizer in our small garden. So up to this time, my children already participated in that advocacy. Next is being a friend and a sister to my colleagues, especially in the engineering profession, where we pulled our efforts in pushing to protect our environment. So we have so many activities that I will share with you later on. And of course, being a professional agricultural engineer and as a director of our bureau that is more focusing on providing the necessary interventions such as agriculture machinery, facilities and infrastructure, and mechanizing our agricultural sector in the Philippines. So let's start now with my professional engagement. I started with the Philippine Society of Agricultural and Biosystems Engineer. This is my own engineering professional organization. So here we really advocate to have this mitigation on climate change that I will share later on. From the PSABE, we are member of this umbrella organization, which is the Philippine Technological Council, which is the umbrella of 13 engineering organizations, and the Women Engineers Network, where I became the chairperson for 7 years, is under this umbrella. So we have so many initiatives. We conducted a training, seminar, international events dedicated for climate change. And of course, I become chair of the Women Engineers of the ASEAN Federation of Engineering Organization, which is our organization also within the ASEAN for the women engineers. And we likewise advocated for climate change and other activities such as gender equality. And for our global organization, our umbrella organization, which is the INWEST, the International Network of Women Engineers and Scientists, where I am actively participating in the Asia Pacific Nations Network, or the APNN. So all of these are all or has or have their own activities towards climate mitigation. On the side of professional employment, I applied my advocacies and initiatives, including my competencies on climate change in all our programs and projects. So we can integrate all of this, that producing or providing food for our people vis-a-vis protecting also the environment is our greatest challenge. So for our contribution to climate change, so we have here in a year we are conducting 2 to 3 tree planting activities, because we believe that planting a tree is very important in preserving our environment. So from my organization as an agricultural engineer, we have again a nationwide tree planting on April 23, which will be participated by more than 50 schools offering agricultural and biosystems engineering, including also our 13 regional Ipcc chapters, including also the Young Engineers section that will all plant trees nationwide. The trees are usually fruit trees that can be sourced for food. We have also forestry, and sometimes we also plant mangroves, because Philippines is surrounded by waters and a very long shoreline. So last year we conducted our sponsored InWest, and the activities was dedicated to women engineers and scientists, a catalyst to climate action. In here, Dr. Kanga was our plenary speaker. And of course, I shared my advocacies in the last COP26 meeting. So these are our initiatives in terms of my professional organizations. Now let's go to the contributions to climate change in my employment as the director of BAFE. First, we have the renewable energy program. We have the solar-powered irrigation system. So instead of using the motorized pump using oil, we have now here the solar-powered irrigation. So we use solar panel. Then we have the wind pump irrigation. Philippines is a very windy area, so we maximize the utilization of wind power. We have also the ram pump. We have the biomass gasifiers, and also the biogas, because we have so many livestock for production. And we use also our agri-waste for our partners, such as the rice hull and sawdust. We have also the solar-powered urban aquaponics, solar PV grid tie and off-grid system. So these are all our initiatives in terms of prefabs. Next is, may I share to you the National Organic, or the NOAP. This initiative ensures health and welfare of our farmers, consumer, and general public. We was also to minimize pollution and destruction on the environment. So as an agricultural engineer, we encourage the use of drone for the application of pesticides, fertilizers. Then we also encourage the use of precision agriculture in terms of irrigation through drip. And we always utilize our waste material, agri-waste material, to be converted into fertilizers for our next cropping season. Another initiative is the Climate Smart Farm to Market Road. In here, we want to advocate to live with the environment. We ensure that our projects will not affect so much the environment, the environmental degradation. So we also ensure that our project, the Farm to Market Road, can withstand the environmental or climate damages, because we are suffering or experiencing extreme typhoons, flooding. So we need to build infrastructure that could withstand these challenges. The next contribution is on ABIMIS. So this is the dashboard for our ABIMIS. So you can see the buffet is the one managing this ABIMIS. This ABIMIS is designed to harmonize our inventory. So nationwide, all agencies intervention in the agri-fishery sector are put in place. The data and the information are put in the ABIMIS. So here we can provide government and private sector with easily data for their planning, and for whatever intervention needed, both from public and private initiatives. Because of this pandemic, we're able to monitor project implementation without going to the field. So we can minimize logistical expenses, especially now that the oil is very expensive. So we can save from oil through our system of monitoring. So the next one is the government internship program for ABI Youth. This is a government collaboration between the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Labor and Employment. So here we train our young agricultural and biosystems engineer, new graduates, others are newly licensed, to sharpen their competencies, their crafts, so that they become expert on this field of agricultural and biosystems engineering. In return, they will help us in preserving also the environment with the proper technologies to be in place. So that is our 5 major initiatives on climate change, but we can share much more. But due to time constraint, this is our 5 programs to share with you. So finally, for the conclusion, our greatest challenge as agricultural and biosystems engineer, first of all, is to provide food. I, as a mother, I should ensure that my children should eat and have the right food with the correct nutrients and safe. So we are very vulnerable to produce food for our family. We have to work for it. But in doing so, we have to ensure the protection of our environment, which is our second challenge to be faced. And being an agricultural and biosystem engineer, we are also to protect the plants and animals. At the same time, we are protecting the human beings, the farmers, the fisher folks, and the consumer, for providing a safe food, no residues or lesser residues that is tolerable by our human body. So that's my presentation. Thank you so much for your kind attention. And may I also take this opportunity to thank my friend, Dr. Kanga, for your endorsement. Thank you so much, and thank you, Rovani. That's all, and back to you, Madam Peggy.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Tapel. Thank you for the interesting perspectives from Asia, and in particular, sharing your personal story with us. Thank you very much. We're running a bit out of time, but we also have to listen to the two other panelists. And now we come to Africa. I would like to introduce to you as our speaker, Renee Esombaji from Cameroon. Ms. Esombaji holds a global executive MBA in business school in Spain, with additional program in ethics and corporate governance from Singapore. She's also an engineer by profession with masters in science, graduating from University of ECE in Paris, including additional program in management at Stanford University in UK. In August 2020, she was also recognized as a woman as one of Women Inspiring Women award, which she received from that business school. She's also has a consulting firm specializing in digital transformation in Europe and in Africa. Renee is recognized for her experience as a top African woman in tech. She's an international consultant working for both European and the African Union, World Bank, African Development Bank, and international telecommunication unions, government, and private sector. So therefore, Renee, your chance to share with us the African perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Peggy Oti. Hi, everybody. Good evening to the panelists, the organizer from UNESCO. I'm very grateful to be here. I would like to say a global hello to our speaker, our audience joining from all around the world. So, like it was said, my name is Renée Esombaji, and I am an engineer by training, but I'm also the founder of the Digital Coalition, which is an NGO with the UN ECOSOC status that is based in Cameroon, Gabon, France, and Germany. And I would like to thank Marlene. I'm a member of the Women in Engineering Committee at WFEO. Some of us are here today thanks to Marlene and the great job she has been doing to promote women in engineering. Referring back to the Digital Coalition, that NGO aims to do three things: attract, retain, and maintain women in STEM. Because we think that women have a great role to play within our societies. And I think 2 weeks ago, we had a great celebration in Cameroon, celebrating both the World Engineering Day, which is an initiative led by WFEO, UNESCO, and others organizations, and also the Women's Day. One is celebrated on March 4, and the other one is on March 8. And we know that women in the World Engineering Day, it's World Engineering for Sustainable Development, and it's a very unique opportunity to reconcile women engineering and also to play a role, to act like role model and advocate to attract those women in engineering. So what we are doing at the Digital Coalition is that we are really preparing the next generation of women in engineering, and all of them are in high school, in university, by advocating and by explaining the importance and the importance of celebrating those 2 days, reflecting the COVID and also the century we are living. We want to stress the fact that they have a great role to play, and we want to give them a little bit of sensitization. So coming back to climate change, obviously it's a timely issue in our society, and we are observing human impact on climate in Africa, especially. We have more floods, we have natural disasters, landslides, a lot of issues that communities, population are facing. And we know that climate change is actually the long-term change in the average weather patterns that have come to define Earth's local, regional, and global climate. It's the result of our actions locally, nationally, regionally, and globally. And if we don't address this issue, we know that this can generate a disaster on a global scale. Now, there is a key role women scientists and engineers can play in addressing climate change, and especially in Africa. When we think about Africa, obviously we think about the continent, but within that continent, there are 54 countries. And in each country, you have so many various and diverse communities. For example, in Cameroon, we have almost 300 tribes, and we have so many landscape, climate, according to the region where you are. So women are playing a central role in that society because of the activities, and some of them are bringing the food, the daily food in-house every day. And we also want to stress the fact that women scientists are key innovators when it comes to climate change, and they can be instrumental in the development of significant solutions. Because the basis of engineering is innovation, and like it was mentioned, my field is in digital transformation. So there is a greater role women and female engineers can play in developing innovative solutions to tackle the climate change problem through our technical scientific knowledge. In addition to the deep knowledge we can have from knowing our local environment. So when we have actions towards young women and attracting them into STEMs, we think that at the end there might be this, and I would like to quote Mrs. Stewart, women are solution multipliers, but young generation and young women are even more in that. So we really think that they are able to find breakthrough solutions to all those various problems. So how can women in science and female engineers can address climate change? The first thing is that we can use information and communication technology to inform and sensitize. As you may know, in Africa, the most common things that is used is the smartphone. You know, you can go in every place, you know, they could not even be a road, but there will be a smartphone. So we can really use ICT to display the information, use technology and social media to deliver the information to all communities all around the countries. So information can be carried faster and more easily than ever, and we can leverage the fact that African society is very connected. Sensitization is of the utmost importance when it comes to global warming, because only 56% of the world global population is aware that climate change is happening and actively fighting against the danger of global warming. So first, people need to be informed, they need to be warned, and also they need to understand that it's not only a cultural belief, but some climate change effects are actually the result of our action in our immediate environment. We also think that women can bring a new perspective to the problem. Obviously, if we address climate change only with a male view, we will, miss a great opportunity to find a global and inclusive solution. So women will bring a more holistic, creative, and integrative perspective to the global climate change problem. And I do think that this will help us to develop viable solutions that will tackle the global warming problem in a more efficient way. The most important thing we need to do also is prevention by collecting data. And ICT is really key to gather data from all around the places. And for that, we need to work with local communities. Like I said, they can be reached out through smartphone, and we can collect accurate data from inaccessible places, given the variety of geographical structure in Africa, and especially in Cameroon. Like I mentioned, we have different type of climate. We have the desert close to the north with Chad. We have the plains, the mountain, the valleys. So we have so many climates that we really need to gather data and to get specific solution, even if all of them are embedded in a global policies. We also can inform people of exposure to unsafe zone using those data. And this data collection process is doable with the use of smartphone application and ICT. Lastly, I want to stress the fact that we need to work closely with indigenous community. Indigenous community have used artisanal method of studying climate for a long time. These methods were passed down from generation to generation. For instance, there are elements in nature that foretell natural disasters. Some observe the birds, other insects, other the sea level rise, etc. And all of these information can actually be combined to technology to bring a more inclusive solution. And early detection of impending danger can ultimately save lives. Hence, the importance of working hands with local indigenous community, acknowledging and validating this group knowledge and expertise when it comes to global climate challenge. And this would allow women in STEM to cooperate with local experts so that they will develop and co-develop the best solution with the interest of the community at heart. And this will help us to reach globally the 2030 Sustainable Development Goal. What I want to highlight here is the fact that a lot of rural communities are doing subsistence farming. So addressing climate change issue is not only a matter of this global warming problem, but it's also helping those women who are in the center of their society, their community, and their family to have sustainable activities and to make sure that they have the basic things they need for their daily lives. I would like to also share with you that in many regions in Central Africa, people are using water hyacinth for wastewater purification. And if we go through communities, you would find some of these initiatives and people using actually what they have on a natural basis to help and to ensure that they address some of their climate change issues. I would like to end up my presentation by sharing a UN statement I made last year of an e-dream. I think that sometimes when we talk about climate change, and especially for us engineers, we are thinking about the technical solution. Obviously, we are thinking about the policies, but we are sometimes escaping the economic world. You know that Africa is a continent that is moving fast toward industrialization, and we need to make sure that as an engineer, we need to sensitize the private sector, the industrial community, so that what we are going to use in our plants, in our industries in Africa are inclusive and sustainable. So this is also our responsibilities to actually address that issues and to inform the economic communities. I recently traveled with Ségolène Royal. She was in Cameroon sharing a lot of on climate change, but only with the political communities and, you know, with some communities. She's working through one of her NGO. And I actually stress the fact that it's very important to come to the private sector and to inform them that we also have a responsibility. We can look at what is happening in the most developed economy and prevent ourselves to do the same mistakes. So I have an e-dream. It's an e-dream of an inclusive society by 2030, where science is not a barrier, but an entry point for fully digital literate citizens, including those indigenous community. It's an e-dream of an equal society where women and men have eliminated gender biases through powerful and efficient algorithms. It's an dream of a green tech society where each computer, IT system, and infrastructure aim to reduce carbon emissions worldwide. A new dream of an harmonized tech regulatory framework for equitable shares of tech giants' profit and investment in critical IT infrastructure. This is a new dream of a safe cyberspace, especially for the most vulnerable ones, including the children. For this dream to become a reality, I foresee UN policymakers, government, private sector, and NGOs acting in a digital coalition where they come together to address some of the most critical tech challenges of the 21st century. Not to mention that climate change is also one of the tech challenges. This coalition will ensure that no one is left behind as our society embraces the tech world. Indeed, the challenge of the digital revolution are not the technical ones, but the human one. As we lay the foundation of SDGs to foster the path of the society we want, we shall make sure that we move together and design our society not according to tech values or innovation, but according to fairness, equalness, inclusivity, sustainability, and humanity as identified and portrayed in the Sustainable Development Goal. From a private sector point of view, our economies have been recently shaped by COVID-19, but this could be nothing compared to the digital gap it has revealed. Instead, we can leverage this pandemic and come together to enroll our citizens, our business, our government in the digital economy. To me, the most important thing is not how it all started, but the way we end it. And we need to end it with most women in STEM. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Esomaji, for the perspective from Africa, particularly Central Africa, but also sharing your e-dream and calling for, global coalition and also calling for digital coalition with the community at the heart of it, including indigenous, community. Colleagues, we're running out of time, but we have to give the chance to our last but not the least speaker from the Caribbean, in the name of Professor Michelle Michael from Trinidad and Tobago. Professor Michael is a professor of urban and regional planning at the University of West Indies, St. Augustine, Trinidad and Tobago. She's the coordinating lead author of the Small Islands chapter on Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, Working Group 2, a report on impacts, vulnerability, and adaptation. Professor Michael is also a steering committee member of the International Science Council, the UN Habitat, University Partnership Initiative, and Regional Engagement Partner of the Future Earth Coast. Professor Michelle Michael has been commissioned, and congratulations, to serve as an advisory capacity to the United Nations, World Bank, and other several Caribbean governments. She's the author of several publications on climate change adaptation, urban planning, disaster risk reduction, environmental management, and sustainability development. So thank you very much for joining us. So now, Professor Michael, the floor is yours.
We cannot hear you, Professor Michael.
Professor Michael, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, loud and clear.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning to all. Thank you, Chair. And I wish to thank UNESCO and Rovani Sigamoni for the invitation to present on this highly esteemed panel. So I've been invited to talk about STEM and women in relation to climate change. So I would ask that my slides be put up for me, please. Excellent. Can I get slide view? First of all, can we go to the second slide?
By pressing this, thank you.
Can you move to the second slide, please?
Yes, can you see it?
Yes, I'm seeing. I'm only on the first slide, but I'd like to move to the second slide.
Is this it?
Okay. I'm not seeing anything there. Let's see. Not seeing anything, Ravani.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm gonna
click
try that again.
enable editing, and then you have the slide,
Okay.
and then you go on the slide mode or the full screen. Yeah, great, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, but you need, can you go up a bit further? Up, up, up. Sorry about that. Up, right.
Okay, that's one.
So, okay, second one, great. So let me start again. Women play a significant role in STEM and climate change. The areas in which we are involved would be in curriculum development, designing and technological solutions to adapt to and mitigate global warming impacts. And of course, we play a very instrumental role in project implementation. Next slide, please. Right, so an increasing number of women are educators in STEM at all levels, including at the primary, secondary, and tertiary levels. And more we are seeing more women become more engaged through their various disciplines in providing responses to climate change. Next slide, please. So first of all, in settlement planning or urban planning, women have been actively engaged in the preparation of land use zoning plans. We have been involved in site selection to avoid hazard-prone areas, and we are also very key in reviewing and evaluating informal settlements and the need for upgrading, especially upgrading aimed at reducing low-income household vulnerability to climate change. Next slide, please. In the engineering field, we see that because of some households being affected by flooding, women engineers are actively involved in flood-proofing houses. They are involved in coastal flood modeling using geographic information systems where maps are actually prepared to identify areas of high vulnerability, medium vulnerability, etc., to ensure public health and safety. Coastal engineers are often involved in dealing with erosion, sea level rise, storm surges, and flooding, which are all impacts of climate change. And women are, in fact, doing a lot of work in coastal engineering. Women are also pursuing projects that involve designing green infrastructure as part of ecosystem-based adaptation. So not just are they involved in dealing with the engineering structures that deal with coastal defenses to mitigate coastal flooding, but women engineers and are involved in mixing the engineering approaches with the ecosystem-based approaches in terms of the use of green infrastructure. And women are also actively engaged in conducting research in designing solar and wind-powered energy sources. And so I have colleagues from the University of the West Indies. They are coastal engineers and they have done a lot of work on coastal defenses. Next slide, please. In architecture, women are involved in dealing with the issue of climate change. For example, they have been involved in the design of roofs to withstand tropical cyclones. Vaulted ceilings are often used to achieve the cooling effect in the face of global warming. And the jalousie windows are used to keep out the hot sun and to filter air through. So the architecture is well adapted to the household living conditions. Next slide, please. And of course, I do have colleagues who are ecologists that are dealing with watershed management for the water conservation and soil management, which will all be impacted by climate change in terms of heavy rainfall, droughts, etc. Mangrove restoration as part of a natural buffer system and saving coastal ecosystems such as coral reefs and seagrass beds. And here I have a colleague of mine, Dr. Ruhana Juman, who is talking to the engineers on the ground. So I come back to what I was tasked to do, which is the ground level and action. Project implementation in terms of planning, engineering, architectural, and ecosystem-based adaptation projects involve a lot of input from women who are engineers and architects and so on. Yes, they are key agents at the community level in terms of the mobilization of communities to become actively involved in implementing some of the project ideas. Women are involved in the policy-making aspects of disaster risk reduction, but they have limited input on the ground. And this has to do with the patriarchal system and the way in which orders are given in response to emergencies and so on. So in terms of reflections, I've identified gaps. I think more work has to be done to have a larger representation of women at the decision-making table. Women are involved in policy making, but we need to elevate their voices at policy making and at the decision-making level as well. And I think part of the issue is that while women are the interface of policy formulation, there has to be an enhancement of skills in terms of management skills, budgeting skills, and implementation skills. And this can be attained via training workshops that are targeted towards improving women's skills in these areas. As you know, 30% of the women were involved in the Ipcc's 6th assessment report on climate change. And I think that we do need a much higher level of representation. And certainly, if we are to attain climate resilient development, transformative action is needed, and we need to have women become far more assertive and to use their voice to have some presence where it matters most, which is at the decision-making level and at the project implementation level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Michael, and thank you for being straight, direct, straight to the point, and for this, beautiful conclusion where you're requesting for women in policymaking, women in STEM, encouragement, and also bringing all together that we have to form digital coalition. At the same time, you should also have women as solution multipliers, and also co-design and co-create with local and indigenous knowledge people. So thank you all very much, distinguished international experts. And we couldn't have got it any better than this. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, so we will not have time for, for questions from the online participants. But just quickly, could three of you give me your home, what you would like the participant to take home? Very quickly, less than a minute. So I'll start with Marlene. Quickly, take home.
Well, I think the take home is that women engineers in particular, but also scientists, we have the skills. We're ready to participate. We just need a seat at the table. And I think you cannot have a sustainable solution to climate change without half the world's brain power and participation of women in those solutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tu.
Be great mentors, bring women to the table, invite them to engage, and you'll be surprised about the solutions and the contributions that they bring to the world's challenges.
Thank you, Dr. Tapel.
Let us all work to have a healthy environment. A healthy environment will give us a healthy people. So maybe in the coming year, we can avoid another pandemic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ms. Esobonji.
So I like this quote from Peter Drucker that says that the best way to create the future, the best way to have a future is to create it. And what I would like to say is that women have the resources inside, and all we need to do is to take our position as an engineers and as a leader to design the inclusive and sustainable society we want. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Professor Michael.
Yes, I have two succinct points. I think women need to step up in terms of mentoring a younger generation of women to be far more assertive than we have been in the past. And I certainly think that we as women need to educate our men folk to recognize that we are multitaskers, we can find solutions, and to respect the fact that we are equal partners in development. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you very much. And someone has said the best way for the future is to create it. So thank you all very much, as distinguished panelists. And I would like to thank my team in UNESCO for driving this, Amal and her team, and Rovani in partnership with WFEO. So now I hand over to you, Amal, to give the closing remark. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peggy, for this. Thank you for you and for all the speakers. Dear ladies and gentlemen, we have had a most inspiring hour on the topic of the role of women in STEM and addressing climate change. Climate change is a threat multiplier, as you all have addressed already. The impacts of pandemics like COVID-19 are likely to be exacerbated by climate change, as are extreme climate events, biodiversity loss, and the water crisis. In fact, the most prominent risks to humanity are climate action failure and extreme weather events. According to the 2021 Global Risk Report by the World Economic Forum. So unfortunately, women and the children are the most vulnerable, as we have heard from you all. So how do we empower women in STEM about climate change? Firstly, we empower the young women with knowledge and information about STEM and the climate change, so that they can make informed decisions in their chosen path of study and careers. Secondly, we ensure that there is no gender bias in technology and the devices for girls and boys, especially when they are younger. Thirdly, we should strive to make access to technology accessible to girls and young women so that they can obtain global information. UNESCO has education and science at the heart of its work and believes in gender equality and attracting more women into STEM and engineering. And work and believes in gender equality and attracting more women also to empower them with more information about climate change so they can make informed decisions for now and for the future. Our motto is changing minds, not the climate. A very big thank you to our esteemed panelists, and we at UNESCO look forward to working closely with all of you in the near future and in the role of women in STEM addressing climate change. Thank you, Peggy. Thank you for the team, Rovani, and all the team members. Thank you to all of you. Yeah, all the best for all of you. Thank you very much. Bye.
Yeah. So thank you very much, colleagues. Shall we take a photo of the panelists and the UNESCO team? So Jing, may I ask you to take a photo, please? Please all turn on your cameras. Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. Can you take a photo of us? Thank you. Have you?
I took one. I can send it.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
So
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Thanks so
Bye.
much.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night. Bye.
Yeah. So thank you very much, UNESCO team.
King, you can stop recording. Sorry.
Yes, I stopped.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you very much, UNESCO team, for this.